If you look at the theory of evolution, it shows from stages, it's accidents in development, it's mutations, it's more mutations leading to more mutations. So specimens change, species change. If you look at the wide variety of flowers there are all around the world, they all stem from single cell organisms. They're all the same, but they've slowly evolved. The theory that my opponent, was talking about, that everything has to go back to somewhere. Well, look at the universe. The universe starts at finite points. Everything has gone on from there. We've come from a point so infinitely small and come to all of this. And then you've got the whole universe, and it expands for infinity. There is everything at our doorstep. And you take it back to that finite point. Why does it have to go back further? Who created God? If it has to go further, then you go back, who created God? Who created that? God is the more complex option, because for such an almighty being to exist in the whole universe, that he can create such wonderful splendour all around us, such a wonderful world, that he'd have to be so much more magnificent, so much more complex than the just simple science that everything is an accident of nature, everything is evolved by itself. Us, look at the differences. People have different shaped noses, we're all different heights, we're different genders. And it's just accidents. God did not create us all to be different. That makes it so much more complex. It's an argument of logic. It's simply coming down to which explanation is the simplest. And I always find that the simplest explanation is that the one that you can explain, the one that comes down to the simple answer. That if God had to be created, then who created God?
Sorry. If you can leave the questions, let the panel have their chance, and then we'll. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's my argument. I think reading all this isn't going to help. That is my argument.
I'd like to thank both speakers for their opening arguments. I'll give you 5 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah.
I think what I said at the beginning has to hold true. What did I say at the beginning? I said, where do we start the debate? Do we start the debate upon an unknown, upon the attributes of an infinite, and then apply that upon what we see around us? Certainly, if I was to turn around and say, look, I believe in God, God must exist, and then say, look how complex everything is, it proves that God must exist. That's a circular argument, isn't it? What I said is that we need to start off not from the Creator, or not from this infinite being, and then applying it from what we see around us, but rather we need to apply it from what we see around us and come to certain conclusions. So let's take some of the points that was mentioned. The problem of evil. The problem of evil is a very clear example of this. They assume the characteristics of God. They assume that limited human understanding can apprehend and comprehend the essence of the Creator and this unlimited Creator's attributes. And then what they do is they superimpose their limited perception upon the Creator and apply it upon the realities that they see around them. That isn't rational. Neither is that logical. Logic and ration follows from what you sense and the judgments that you make from it. I'll give you an example. If I had a person who's blind from birth, and I said these chairs have a murky shade of green, the murky shade of green to me anyway, and he's blind from birth, what's he going to think? What's he going to comprehend? Because he's not sensed it, he's unable to make a comprehension of it, is he? Because we've not sensed the attributes of the Creator, we cannot now make a judgment upon the Creator. Now some people may say, well, hold on, did you not say a Creator exists? Is that not some type of sensation? But what we have said here is that we can comprehend the existence of the Creator, but we can't understand His existence. So similarly, if somebody starts knocking on the door, I know somebody's behind the door, I'll go and open it up. But whether that's a man or a woman, whether they have blue eyes or brown eyes, I don't know that. But what I do know is that causality, the principle of causality, means there must be an effect, and that effect must be something with regards to a Creator. So the arguments like, for example, the paradox of the stone is very similar. It's assuming the Creator's attributes and then trying to reinterpret it. Even the arguments and further arguments about who created God, and Occam's razor, the question about who created God. Why did we say there must be an initiator? We said there must be an initiator because an infinite regression is impossible. That's what we said. Remember this chain of events from the mobile phones going back to the Big Bang, going before that and going before that and going before that. We said this chain of events is impossible. So the argument, who created God? Then the question then becomes, who created the creator of God? And then the argument, who created the creator of God? The argument, you can keep going on ad infinitum, and that means nothing would be created because each one would be waiting for the prior form. It's the soldier on the battlefield argument, or it's the dominoes. Yeah, the last domino to fall over must be hit by a series of dominoes, and it's the first domino that has to start, has to be initiated to fall in order for the rest of them to fall over. So the argument of who created God is a false argument. You have to prove infinite regression. Yeah, the burden of proof now is upon the atheist to prove that infinite regression is a real possibility. I've given an argument that says it's an impossibility. As for the argument of Occam's razor, again, you have to prove this point. You have to assume, you can't just say, well, we'll assume the most simplest explanation for everything. Because we know, isn't it, in life, it's not always the simplest explanation that explains everything. What you need is maybe the simplest and also the most powerful explanation, the most compelling explanation. What I try to give to you is a simple and compelling explanation that what we see around us is limited, finite, and dependent. We cannot explain it in any other way except by the necessity of an unlimited, infinite creator. As for asking the question, what comes before the Big Bang, or what is the Big Bang dependent upon, these are natural questions. Look, Stephen Hawking even discusses it. Initially, he came to the position that there was nothing before the Big Bang. Now he talks about a time before time. Yeah, that's why they talk about membrane structure and membrane theory, which is a principle which talks about what comes before the Big Bang, and they try to explain how the Big Bang comes about. You can't just see a ball flying in the air and assume that just because it's flying in the air that there is no causation for it. That's irrational. We'll always assume that. Just one final example. If I go back and I don't have my car in the car park or wherever it's parked, I'm not going to assume, well, it's not there. There's no point me asking the question, what happened before? Rather, I just have to carry on. Rather, I'm going to ask the question, who has nicked my car? Thank you.
There are two key points I'd like to raise to that argument. Firstly, the theory that the proof lies with the atheist. The proof does not lie with the atheist. I could say that there is a teapot circling the globe and that no one can tell me that it's not real. No one can prove it. It is up to you. Everybody here sat here today, you must prove to me that this teapot does not circle the globe. It is an argument of logic. It is up to the people that are believing in something to go out there and prove it. As for the infinite theory, why does it have to go back to God? There is no proof of God. There is no solid thing that you can hold in your hand and say, this is what God is. If you go back to the Big Bang, science cannot quite explain where it comes from yet, but the answers are out there. Why assume it's something more complicated? Why not assume that it's something we can't quite grasp yet, but it is out there for the answers to be found out? Science makes leaps and advances all the time. Look at the telephone, an iPhone, a wonderful piece of technology. You can go on the internet, you can talk to your friends without having to pay for it. But if you go back through the history of the telephone, you look at 2 or 3 phones back, they can't do any of those things. The phone has evolved as we have evolved. We're a curious species. We look to technology to advance ourselves, to make our lives more comfortable. Nothing has spurred this on other than our own comfort. So we've developed phones. First of all, they were just quick phones with like buttons where you could just talk. You had to go through operators, they had to connect you. Then you get phones put into the households. Now you've got mobile phones, you've got mobile internet, you've got internet access anywhere around the world. Technology has evolved along with us, and it has a finite point. Technology gets to an end, and yes, somebody has started that, but it's always come out of necessity. If you go back to the beginning of time, there is no reason to say, well, that finite point, God must have put it there. There is no evidence to support that.